The student survey forms part of government policy, which requires that third level students provide feedback on their experience. Previously, it was known as the Irish Survey of Student Experience, ISE, and so named because internationally it drew inspiration from the Australian and New Zealand Survey of Student Experience, ASI, and the US National Survey of Student Experience, NESE. So questions have been drawn from those two surveys, and it has also followed the principle of measuring student engagement. Nationally, it does draw inspiration from UCC in terms of prior to this survey, we ran our own survey for students. So they have adapted some of our principles and questions as well. It's co-sponsored by the Higher Education Authority, the Irish Universities Association, the Technical Higher Education Association, and the Union of Students in Ireland. Currently, 7 universities participate, 13 ITs, and 7 other institutions. Now, the data or the responses are analysed nationally, but each institution gets its own data set as well, and each institution is responsible for contextualising the results of that information. For the undergraduates, so the two surveys, the first and oldest is the one for undergraduate students, which is run every year since 2013, and this provides a consistent database since 2014. So in this survey, first years and final years are surveyed every year. More recently, a postgraduate thought survey has been established, and this is run every 2 years. So about 60 core questions. Originally, it was 100 questions, and that 100 questions came from the old UCC survey, where we ran 100 questions. It was cut down to 60 questions relatively early in the process, after about 1 or 2 years. So there's 60 core questions. There is space for additional modules of questions, which can be specific or requested by a particular institution. And this year, there is also a module for questions specifically designed to understand the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the student experience. One approach to measuring how well students are doing could be to measure their attainment. But this is a particularly narrow measure to be using. Internationally, the ASI and NESE took the approach of measuring student engagement. And the Student Survey in Ireland follows this initiative. Further, student engagement is correlated with actually how well students do in their studies, and also other important positive measures. Now, student engagement is seen in higher education as being enhanced through exposing students to high quality learning environments. And measuring this can provide us with the means to develop a fuller understanding of the student experience above and beyond that which you could obtain from just measuring student satisfaction, which is another approach that could be used. So this survey measures two important things. The first is the amount of time and effort that students put into their studies and other educationally beneficial activities. And the second important thing it measures is how institutions deploy resources, how they organise the curriculum and learning opportunities to encourage students to participate in what they regard as meaningful activities that are linked to their own learning. So even though ultimately students are responsible for their own learning, we do recognise that this depends on institutions and staff creating an environment that encourages and supports student involvement in educationally relevant activities. And from this perspective, that's why it's student engagement that's measured rather than student satisfaction or student attainment. One aim of the student survey is to inform policy at national level. And the student survey is managed at national level, and a national report is published every year. But the important point is that the data belongs to the individual institutions. So rather than the data being used to form a league table of institutions, the aim is to foster the use of the data at the institutional level. And it's really only within an institution and in an institutional context that the data for that institution can be fully understood. And the data can be used for a wide variety of purposes. An example could be to determine what initiatives could be undertaken, and then to measure the impact of those initiatives as well. An important purpose is to demonstrate to students how we are being transparent with the feedback they provide from us and how we're responding to that feedback. And in this way, closing the loop in terms of their feedback so that they can see that their feedback does have an impact in terms of how the institution is responding and developing. The responses to the survey are analysed at national level, and every year there's a national report published. We receive our own data set shortly after the conclusion of the fieldwork and once that data has been processed. Now our own report is embargoed until the publication of the national report, but in order to facilitate discussions, we do a preliminary analysis of the indicator scores of our data early to midsummer in consultation with the University Student Surveys Board. The survey has generated a consistent database of results since 2014, and this allows us to do a series of time series analysis as well as analysis between constituent colleges in the universities. The same set of questions have been used in this survey since 2016, although it is possible with particular questions to trace them back to the original in 2014 and even prior that to the pilot and fieldwork. Since its inception, about 250,000 either undergrad final year, first year undergrad final year, or postgrad students have participated in the student survey since that 2013 pilot. And the national response rate has increased steadily from 10.9% in 2013 to 31% in 2020. So the comprehensive survey itself consists of 67 questions, principally grouped by indicator scores. And these are indicators, or indices to which particular items relate to. There's also an additional body of questions that don't directly relate to any specific index, but they're included in the survey because they have a contribution to the broader understanding of student engagement. In addition, an institution can have extra questions just for their own purposes, and this year, as I've said earlier, there's a bank of questions, bank of COVID questions. So the indicator scores are higher order learning, reflective and integrative learning, quantitative reasoning, learning strategies, collaborative learning, student-faculty interaction, effective teaching practices, quality of interactions, and the supportive environment. Now, you wouldn't expect all colleges within the university to be scoring exactly the same on all of these indices. And what you find when you look at the data is that colleges can have a particular profile, which is perfectly understandable. When you look at the UCC scores and compare them with the national scores, particularly within our own sector, we are more or less performing where we should be performing in relation to them. Sometimes for some of the scores, the UCC score is slightly lower than the average score for the university sector. But those differences tend not to be statistically significant, or if they are very, very small effect sizes, which would indicate that they probably don't reflect real life differences.
Each participating institution will tackle this part of the survey cycle in different ways. How we go about achieving impact on foot of the results of the student survey will depend on many factors, such as what messages emerged from the results, did student feedback point to major changes needed, are there some enhancements that need to be looked at in the short, medium, long term? If so, how can the leaders within the institution make this change happen? In autumn, the results are compiled into an annual university level report and circulated more widely internally. The results report serves as a guide for continued enhancement of teaching and learning and also student engagement. The results are presented at Academic Council, and summary reports utilising the disaggregated college data are circulated to each college to open discussion and explore uses of the data within the local context. The text-based responses are also distributed to each college at this time. Continuing the wide communication of results, feedback is shared with colleagues across all support areas, for example, IT services, UCC societies, UCC library colleagues, UCC Skills Centre, etc., so that the data can be used to improve and enhance facilities, supports and the learning environment for all students. The results can also be accessed by programme directors and coordinators to support timely and impactful programme level trend analysis, inform decision making in programme and school committees, and for use in annual programmatic monitoring and programmatic review. This report identifies potential areas that schools may wish to address in their action plans. College-specific presentations are offered and carried out upon request. So how can we best understand indicator scores for different indicators? Indicators present an additional way to explore the data by signalling differences in results of different groups of students. As such, scores for any given indicator act as signposts to areas of potential further interest. Different indicators should not be compared to each other. There is no simple direct link between them, and to date, analysis of student survey data demonstrates that greatest variation is evident within institutions rather than between institutions. This reinforces the view that students and staff within individual higher education institutions are best placed to interrogate their local data. They best understand the local context. Considerable efforts have been made by those who implement the survey in the institutions including staff and students, to make the survey an operational success. UCC have tried and adjusted a number of approaches to StudentSurvey.ie operations since inception of the survey. As a result, our response rate has almost doubled over the past 3 years, going from 13.9% in 2018 to 22% in 2020. A number of key developments have been undertaken to support and encourage our colleagues to realise the potential for this increasingly valuable source of data. The National Strategy for Higher Education to 2030 seeks to ensure that each institution establish a robust student feedback ecosystem. The strategy also makes other valuable recommendations, such as ensuring the best quality outcomes for graduates of HEIs in Ireland. A key consideration in that regard is whether the supports currently being provided and taken up by our students are maximising this capacity to meet this demand. Unlocking the value of the student survey data will complement our strategic direction and enable us to gain a better understanding of our students, analyse progress and enact change. There are more avenues and possibilities for further analysis of the data, and that can be pursued. In the meantime, the next steps for the survey are focused on efforts to interrogate and draw meanings from the results.